the European Union gets 40% of its natural gas from Russia, countries have been looking to other regimes to meet their needs for cheap energy, such as Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and even Iran. But with all of these regimes accused of serious and often extreme human rights abuses, is it even possible to have an ethical foreign policy? I'm joined now by James Dorsey, the award-winning foreign correspondent on ethnic and religious conflict. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Firstly, what do you make of America looking to Saudi Arabia and even Venezuela, for that matter, for their energy needs in response to the energy crisis that has been partly precipitated by the sanctions against Russia?
Well, as a matter of principle, obviously, it's fairly ironic that one turns to a country that is invading and bombing its neighbor to try and sort out a problem caused by another country, both of them autocracies, that also is invading its neighbor. So clearly, there's something wrong here. But it does go to the very fundamental question that you asked at the top of this discussion, which is, can you have an ethical foreign policy? And I think the answer is you can, in the sense you can have ideals, and you will not always be able to carry out policies in line with those ideals. The trick to make that credible is basically to explain on what criteria and why you decide on a case-to-case basis when to apply your values and when not.
I mean, on that point with Saudi Arabia, I mean, there's still so many unanswered questions in relation to Khashoggi. There was 81 people executed, I think, in one day last week. You mentioned or alluded to the war in Yemen. And we know about Saudi Arabia exporting Wahhabi Salafist versions of Islam across the globe. I mean, why do you think that we have a more softer relationship, so to speak, with the Saudi regime?
Well, first of all, just for reasons of accuracy, to be fair to the Saudis, and yes, there was the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, for which they should be held accountable. Yes, they have a justice system which is very questionable. And yes, there is massive abuse of human rights. But to be fair, they have by and large stopped the funding of an ultra-conservative interpretation of Islam since about 2015. And have tried to promote what I would call an autocratic version of Islam. And that goes to why are countries often willing to look the other way with the Saudis? One, because obviously Saudi Arabia is the world's swing oil producer. So if you have to compensate for, on a short-term basis, for a loss of oil in the market, for example, Russian oil, then the Saudis are the ones who can do that on the spot. Mm-hmm. Another reason is simply that they are the custodians of the holy places, Mecca and Medina, and therefore wield significant influence in the Islamic world. Now, the question is whether or not one could achieve those objectives while at the same time pressuring the Saudis to be more forthcoming on issues like human rights. We mentioned the executions this week. That was basically a snub for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The 81 were in the same week, and a day before he arrived in Saudi Arabia, there were another 3 executions. So he had a total of 84 in 1 week.
I mean, on that point about the fact that they may have stopped funding some more extreme versions of kind of fundamentalist Islam. I mean, do you buy that they have been liberalising then? I mean, many people have said Mohammed bin Salman has been relaxing certain laws. We know in the last few years that women have been allowed to drive, for example. I mean, do you buy that they have been liberalising?
I think we've got to be precise about what we're talking about. So the Saudis, for more than 4 decades, funded the propagation of a very ultra-conservative form of Islam that they practiced at home, primarily for geopolitical reasons. They, in 2015, with the rise of the Salmans, King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, they have stopped doing so, and they have introduced far-reaching, not far enough, but nonetheless far-reaching social reforms. None of those reforms or changes have been anchored in religious law. They are anchored in Saudi law. They are anchored in decrees by the government. but there has been no change of the theology as such that the kingdom has adhered to since its founding in 1932. The only thing that's changed is that they now reach out for interfaith dialogue. I think that's more a move designed to improve the kingdom's reputation rather than something real happening on the ground. You still cannot build a non-Muslim house of worship in the kingdom itself. And they have stopped propagating and pouring huge amounts of money into religious ultra-conservatism beyond their borders.